Metaphors can influence how we perceive the world. This is not an understatement, given that in one experiment, participants had a more favorable opinion of the police when the researchers used the word guardians as a metaphor instead of the word warriors, which had a more negative connotation. So in this video, we are going to learn why metaphor is effective and, at the same time, why it is such a popular literary device. Irony, oxymoron, personification, simile, symbolism. These are the common literary devices taught in schools. Literary devices help everyone, not just writers or poets, explain a scene or an object, especially the abstract, in a clearer and a shorter manner. Out of these literary devices, metaphor is one of the most popular, and it has never been ignored in literature classes, and it is used very often even until nowadays. A metaphor is a figure of speech that compares an object to another object that may seem unrelated yet contains similar characteristics. For instance, time is money. Time is being compared with money. Of course, time is not actually money, but both of them have the same characteristics. They are both valuable. You can also add a few more sentences to clarify your metaphor. Time is money. It's a valuable resource for your achievement. The second sentence is an extended line. People call a metaphor with these extra lines an extended metaphor. You may or may not realize this, but when you say spending time, this phrase is also a metaphor. It's an implied metaphor implying that you are spending time like money. And when a metaphor is commonly used in a day-to-day speech, or when its imagery is not really applicable anymore, the metaphor becomes a dead metaphor. You can think of the phrase spending time as a dead metaphor also, or otherwise, a common phrase like time is running out is also a dead metaphor because this was meant to be compared with the sand in an hourglass, which is not so widely used nowadays. By the way, time is running out is also an implied metaphor because the sand in an hourglass is not clearly stated in the sentence. A little reminder, if you see a comparison using like or as, that comparison is not a metaphor, it's a simile. For example, you run as swift as the wind. It's a simile, not a metaphor. The term metaphor was taken from an ancient Greek term, metaphora, which came from the word metapherein, with meta meaning over or across, and pherein meaning carry. So metapherein means carry over, which oddly makes a lot of sense. Humans have been using metaphors for a long time. I'm not sure how widely used a metaphor is during the ancient Greek time, but you can see the usage of metaphor popping here and there in the classical works. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey may be filled with similes, but there is an implied metaphor in Iliad in the line, "But Achaeus' armies came on strong in silence, breathing combat fury, hearts ablaze to defend each other to the death." There is a fire metaphor in the phrase hearts ablaze. The heart did not literally get all lit up with fire, but this implies passion, and this metaphor can evoke excitement in readers. In the classics period, there is one metaphorical quote that catch my attention. "Books are mirrors of the soul" by Virginia Woolf, an English writer in the 20th century who wrote many well-known books like Orlando and Mrs. Dalloway. According to this statement, books are mirrors of the soul. Books we read influence how we think. Furthermore, books we like and dislike can be reflections of our thought processes and our personalities. I have another favorite quote. Many people claim that it was uttered by Albert Einstein. "Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by the ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid." Though I'm not so sure where the origin of this quote is, one thing I can confirm is this quote is very impactful and it is still relatable to the modern educational system. A metaphor does not have to be portrayed only in words. It can be represented visually also. Take this thing's commercial for the underwear for periods as an example. The grapefruits give us the impression of vagina and menstruation without the need of showing the real thing. Another way to creatively use a metaphor is to put a metaphor in a story's title to imply the main plot line. The English title of the manga, Kaguya-sama, Love is War, was translated from the Japanese title,
かぐや様は告らせたい天才たちの恋愛頭脳戦
which still have the word love battle in it. Love is war or love battle goes well with the main storyline that the protagonists are competing to each other to make the other one confess their love first, like they are at war. After we've spent time learning about the form and the history of metaphor, the next question left to be answered is, why is metaphor effective? To put it simply, metaphors help us describe and understand complicated ideas within a few words. Trying to explain something abstract like love, happiness, beauty, pain, or sorrow can be extremely exhausting. Instead of trying to explain your thoughts about the subject of love, if you say, love is a drug, it's going to be easier. Our brain will try to connect the relation between love and drugs, then our brain will get the idea from the connection it makes. Another example is, if you say, laughter is the best medicine, most people would just get it within a few seconds. But if you try to explain that laughter is good for your physical and mental health because it eases your worries, it would be quite a mouthful, and let's be honest, it doesn't sound that impressive. A metaphor can do more than conveying the exact message a person wants to convey. It can subtly carry other attributes from one object to another too. For instance, you will get a different feeling from the phrase love is a drug from love is a magnet. Though in both phrases, you want to say that you always find yourself being with or thinking about the one you love. These two sentences give a different connotation. Telling someone love is a drug gives a more negative connotation, as it means that you cannot have enough of this love, like you are basically addicted to it. And we always know that having too much drug is not healthy anyway. In the love is a magnet case, it's more like you can't help it. No matter where you go, you are always drawn to love, and you don't even mean for it to be that way, so it sounds less like your fault. There are some experiments made to explore how metaphors affect our thought process. I'll link the two experiments I'm going to talk about in the description, and also an extra similar experiment if you want to read further. If you still remember the example at the very beginning of the video, participants who took a survey reading the phrase, police officers are guardians, tend to frame the role of the police to be more positive and effective than those who saw the phrase, police are warriors in the survey explanation. It could be that when people read, police are guardians, it reminds them of the guarding role of the police. The participants were also asked for synonyms or words relating to the word guardian or warrior. The result is that people often associate guardian with protector, parent, and some of them mention the word caretaker. On the contrary, people relate warrior to fighter, soldier, and only a very small percentage said hero. Here, despite guardians and warriors being similar as their duty is to fight, guardians fight to guard and protect their people, while warriors fight for, war? In another experiment in 2018, participants were required to read a short passage about a person experiencing cancer. In one group, the passage compared the situation with a battle. In another group, the metaphor frame was a journey. When they were asked if the protagonist in the story would feel guilt for not being able to fight cancer, or if the protagonist would make peace with it, actually, people in both groups believed that the protagonist in the story would make peace with the disease eventually. However, people who have read the battle passage were more likely to answer that the protagonist would feel guilt for not being able to fight cancer. These two experiments are great examples to show that people often talk or feel in a way that is correlated with the metaphor mentioned prior in the conversation. But the effect of a metaphor does not persist forever. When a metaphor becomes common, it also becomes dead. Our brain doesn't need to link characteristics of the two objects anymore to understand that metaphorical sentence. Therefore, a dead metaphor usually doesn't provoke as much emotion. Apart from carrying the characteristics that two objects have in common, metaphors also carry the mood from one subject to another. So you should think wisely before you choose an object to avoid the risk of giving your message receiver a wrong impression. The miracle of a metaphor is that it reflects its user and the culture that the person is living in. The person who claims love is like a drug shows their attitude to the concept of love by their word of choice. And metaphor reflects our culture because, well, not everyone in every country compares their preferences with a teacup and says, "It's not my cup of tea." I cannot confirm that metaphor is the best of the best. There are many other beautiful literary devices to be explored, but metaphor can influence our impression of so many abstract subjects in the world. Ultimately, a metaphor reflects the two subjects being compared. It reflects our culture, and more importantly, it reflects who we are as a person. I have always been wanting to do research on metaphors since I read the Warrior and Guardian paper a few years ago. I'm happy that now I have finally finished the project. I mean, at least I have finally finished recording by now. Alright, if you like this video, don't forget to click like and subscribe for more videos about history, literature, and also linguistics like this. And see you on our next journey.